It's a sunny Friday in Philadelphia, and once again I find myself wandering down South Street, trawling for treasure. So far I've hit Retrospect, as well as my favorite pawn shop, but I have yet to buy anything. My final stop on this highly specific cultural tour is Philly AIDS Thrift. What's this? It looks like a ukulele, but it has 10 strings? Okay, I think I know what this is. It's a bit expensive, but I think it's gonna be worth it. Okay, we're back home. So you may be wondering why I was willing to fork over $200 without even really trying the instrument? Well, check it out. Yes, the body of this instrument is made out of the shell of an armadillo. The instrument is called a charango, and it comes from the Andes Mountains in South America. While I've heard of this instrument, I've never actually seen one in real life. As you can see, the armadillos from the Andes have hair, though I can tell you already, it is not soft. It's like straw. Okay, I just looked up how this thing is supposed to be tuned, so let's hear how it sounds. It's quite nice. Each of the strings is doubled, just like on a mandolin. That means when you're plucking a string, you're actually plucking two strings, each of which is tuned to the same note. But of course, try as you might, they're not going to be exactly in tune with each other, and that subtle difference in tuning is the reason you get that lovely chorus effect. Okay, so I just did a bit more research about this instrument. While we know that the charango comes from the Andes, there's some debate about where exactly it originated. Many people believe it comes from a city called Potosi in Bolivia. The city was founded in 1545 by Spanish conquistadors. It sits at the foot of a mountain called Cerro Rico that used to be very rich in silver. The conquering Spanish forced the local indigenous population to work in the silver mines under famously appalling circumstances. Obviously, the legacy of Spanish occupation left many cultural traces, most notably the Spanish language, Catholicism, architecture, and of course, music. At the time, the Spanish guitar didn't really exist yet, but they had something else called a vihuela. By the way, that word, vihuela, is where the word viola comes from. Also worth mentioning, there's an instrument with that name now in Mexico. It's not exactly the same as the one from back then, but it does have the same origin. Anyway, as the story goes, someone in Potosi saw the Spanish vihuela and thought, hey, I bet I could build an instrument like that. And so they grabbed the nearest armadillo and got to work. And the result was this beautiful and unique folk instrument. There's very little written documentation to confirm the exact town where the instrument was invented. In fact, it doesn't get mentioned in writing until around 1814. And that description makes no mention of armadillo shells. I feel like if the person writing this had seen an armadillo guitar, they probably would have led with that. Anyway, nowadays, most churangos are actually made out of wood. Apparently, it sounds better, and you don't have to kill an endangered animal just to make an instrument. There are many other things that contribute to the sound of the instrument. There's that double-stringed chorus effect that we already talked about. Then there are the actual notes the instrument is tuned to. Here's how the standard classical guitar is tuned. Notice how, as I move from the bottom to the top, the notes get higher. This linear from low to high approach makes it relatively easy to improvise melodies on a guitar. Anyway, here's how the strings of the charango are tuned. It's basically tuned to an A minor 7th chord, which is very pretty. But for newcomers, it's a little bit baffling. Let's go through it again, string by string. This note is higher than this note, which makes sense. But then you've got this weird string that has two different notes. One of which is below anything else on the instrument, and one of which is above the previous string. Then we've got this string which goes back down again. Anyway, this non-linear approach to the string tuning is called reentrant tuning. It's what's also used on a soprano ukulele. The result of all this is an instrument that's very easy to play chords on, but a little bit more confounding when it comes to trying to play a melody. Although I imagine charangistas are used to this by now. As for me, so far I've been mostly doing finger picking on it. Earlier this year, my neighbor Joe gave me this reel-to-reel tape recorder. I've been messing around with recording the churango on it. As with most recorders of this type, it has 2 speeds. Should we see how it sounds at the slower speed? I actually really like it at the slower speed. Obviously the playing's too slow, but the timbre is really nice. Which reminds me, my friend Cameron told me that there's actually an instrument that's just like the charango, but an octave deeper. It's called a runroko, but apparently they're pretty hard to find in North America. So I was at the park last night, and this very nice guy named Noah came up and introduced himself. He and I have a lot in common. We both play various different plucked instruments. I happen to mention that I have this classical guitar just kind of kicking around my house that I'm not quite sure what I want to do with. And he said one thing he's always wanted to do is take a classical guitar and convert it into a Cuban trace. I wasn't exactly sure what that was, so I Googled it when I got home, and I realized, of course, it's a super famous instrument. I've heard it a million times without actually knowing its name. In fact, if you've ever heard the Buena Vista Social Club soundtrack, you've definitely heard the Cuban trace. Also, converting a regular classical guitar is exceedingly easy. There are a bunch of websites that explain how to do it. So I got to thinking, like, if I were to do this conversion and use nylon strings instead of the steel strings one normally finds on a Cuban trace, I could probably get pretty close to that mythical instrument, the runroko. You know, like a churango, but an octave deeper. So yeah, let's give it a shot. The patient we're going to be operating on today is this 3/4 size classical guitar from Samick. Samick is one of the biggest manufacturers of musical instruments in the world. They make guitars for Epiphone and Squier and many other brands. First step is, of course, removing the strings. Next, we take the nut out of the neck and clamp it in a vise. I'm going to use this file to cut some extra grooves in it. Like the classical guitar, a trace has 6 strings, but they're not evenly spaced. Basically, we're going to use the 1st, 3rd, and 5th strings as our guides. We're just going to cut new slots that are about 3 millimeters away from those spots. This should leave us with 3 courses of 2 strings each. The next step is, well, there really is no next step. We just put the strings back on. But not the same strings, actually. I'm using the top 3 strings from 2 different sets for the classical guitar. And instead of putting them through their normal holes, we're going to have the strings share holes. The first 2 strings are going to go through the 1st hole, the second 2 will go through the 3rd hole, and the last 2 will go through the 5th hole. This is what the string spacing looks like when it's done. And for now, I've just tuned this to the top 3 strings of a classical guitar, G, B, and E. Let's try it out. It's pretty nice. Has that sort of tragic chorus sound. The strings are like a mile apart too, so it's super easy to play. I've been recording this in Ableton. I wonder what it would sound like if I were to lower the pitch on it digitally. Oh, that's great. It's funny, even though this instrument is an octave lower than the charango, I still wish it were deeper. Let's add another take. I'm going to speed it up a little bit and maybe add some drums. Let's add the charango in too. In the end, I'm not sure how close the instrument really is to the runroko. That instrument has 5 courses of strings after all, whereas this one only has 3. I'm also not sure how close this instrument is to a Cuban trace guitar because that instrument has steel strings. Either way, it's really rewarding to play. One thing I've realized in my research is that there are many more guitar-like instruments than people realize. From the Hawaiian ukulele to the Puerto Rican cuatro to the Brazilian cavaquinho, each region seems to have its own format, each tuned slightly differently. This converted guitar may be its own thing as well. A huge thanks to Noah Scarra for suggesting this conversion. I highly recommend folks try it out if any of you have a 3/4 size classical guitar lying around, and if you don't like it, it's completely reversible. Anyway, it will surprise no one that I have sampled the Charango, as well as this ersatz Cuban trace. In fact, I sampled each of them 3 times with different microphones. All of those samples are now available to patrons. By the way, the Patreon is just $5, and every month you get exclusive sample libraries just for patrons. So definitely check that out. Okay, I think that's it. See you soon.